Well, welcome to another episode of Digging Deeper. Robert here with Pete.
What's going on?
Yeah, following Easter.
Yeah.
Great
This is the
Easter.
most excited I've ever gotten at the beginning of a podcast.
It threw me off, to be honest. I was kind of like, wait, I don't know what to do with Pete being that
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Digging
expressive.
Deeper.
I've never seen that happen before.
Excited. I had more Easter peeps than I should have had.
He's
this
still
weekend.
on a sugar
And
high,
the sugar
apparently.
is still inside of me.
There's all that stuff going on. But I want to talk about your message. But before I go there, there's one thing that honestly drove me up the wall. And so I want to give you a chance to redeem yourself on this one.
Okay.
How do you pronounce this word? Kippur.
How do you pronounce it?
Yes.
Oh, man. Well, are you asking me? Somebody else asked me this question. Okay. So it's a Hebrew word that English-speaking Jewish people use regularly. Okay. When English-speaking Jewish people say it, they say Kippur.
How do you actually pronounce it?
I don't know Hebrew. I mean, it's not. I think like
Everyone knows that it's pronounced Kuiper. Everybody knows that it's pronounced Kuiper. So you kept on saying Kippur, and I was like, what is going on with you?
Are you being serious right now?
It's pronounced Kuiper. Everybody, Dawson knows that. It's pronounced Kuiper.
No, there's no Y in it.
It's definitely Kuiper. I mean,
If you look at a transliteration,
is it a keet or a kite?
if you look at a transliteration, it would be Keppar. There's no. Are you talking about like a Greek version?
I mean,
of
that's a
it?
great argument, but
Have you
everybody
ever-
in the world knows that it's pronounced
Have you
Kuiper.
ever heard a Jewish person say, "I'm about to go celebrate Yom Kippur"?
Yes, Jan Kuiper all the time. That's the right way to say it, right? What would you say, Jan Kippur?
Everyone I know says Yom Kippur.
Well, I think that you need to just keep a shirt on because it's April Fool's, and I'm just messing with you to start out this podcast on April 1.
I'm gonna punch you in the face. I really am gonna punch you in the face. I was like, "What the crap are you talking about?"
Happy April Fool's, everybody. I needed to fit it in somehow before
I literally was almost like, "We're starting this podcast over. What are you talking about?"
I just wanted to mess with you a little bit.
All right, you got me.
That was good. April Fool's, whatever April Fool's jokes you guys are planning out. Yeah, have fun with that. But it is
Like,
April 1st
Kuiper,
today.
I've never even heard. What are you talking
He
about?
looked at me so angry.
No, well, I was so there was part of my brain that was going, did I get this wrong? Do I not know what I'm talking? Maybe
I just love that you started going into like all kinds of background. You got very intellectual about it. I'm just messing with you.
well, if you talk to me about Greek words, I'm on much stronger footing. So I never studied Hebrew in seminary or college. All I know about Hebrew is what I can sort of glean from like my Logos Bible software and stuff.
That was so
and this
good.
is a joke, and I'm still talking about it.
Yeah,
But
you're still on
You've touched a nerve, Robert.
I knew I would. If you don't know this about Pete, Pete cares about words,
I do like
in a
words.
good way, in a really great way that makes you a great teacher in a lot of ways and helps you kind of break things down with etymology, with words and things like that. And so I knew that was going to land well, but
I care
fun
about
times.
words to shift a little bit to seriousness.
yes,
I care about words because I don't like it when we say things that have no meaning, or we just like throw out platitudes, that's especially when it comes to like my faith and Christianity, of just like things that we just say because we hear them in church, and you just want to be like, what do you mean? Like, what are you talking about? And I want to know that like I understand what I'm saying and why I'm saying it and why am I using these words, and that's why I'm not necessarily like that in every, like if you talk about words outside of Christianity, I'm not quite the same way. I get that way when it comes to like the Bible or my faith. I'm
grateful
like, I
for
want to
that,
know why I'm using these words.
That's good.
So
And the word you used yesterday a lot was the word restored,
yeah,
right? And you talked about how God restores us. Give us kind of a little bit of an overview. If you didn't listen to the message, you should go back and listen to it. But give us kind of a 100-mile view of really what your message was on yesterday for Easter.
100-mile view, like how fast I should talk, or
Not mile per hour. 100 miles is a distance, okay? Not a speed. Words. Important.
words. Yeah, we just talked about the idea that so inherent to the story of the scriptures and what God is doing isn't, and I this is just it's kind of my, in some ways, someone said that message is very you. I'm like, yes, it is. This message is very much like what I've been passionate about, what I've been thinking about for years now, that God wants to actually bring about change in our lives and remake us, not just take us somewhere else. And so I used the kind of analogy or picture of restoring art, or seeing something that's faded coming back to goodness.
Yeah.
And that was random. It wasn't this is a very weird, not weird, this is a very interesting progression. Somebody asked me, I think my father-in-law was like, hey, so how'd you come up with that idea yesterday, you know? And I started thinking about the way I came up with it, and it started with I talk a little bit about the word atonement and things. And I had this idea of like, I think I might want to talk about the idea of atonement and it being bringing people together. And I kind of like, we were in a meeting that we have every Monday, and if you're listening, I sort of brought my hands together, like bring people together. And Ben, our worship pastor, was like, oh, like that art where the hands come together. And I was like, yeah. And it just like totally
just went from there
and turned into all this art. And then I was like, yeah, maybe I'll have some like paintings or something, and I can talk about works of art. And then I randomly started looking at it, and I was like, what, the Sistine Chapel, and I saw this whole article about their restoration process, and I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll kind of go that way and talk about restoring art, how God restores us.
Yeah.
And it wasn't originally called Restored. We had like 5 or 6 different titles for it. I landed there once I had sort of, so yeah, it was just this very like windy road of, and I had plenty of time, which was kind of nice because we wanted to make sure Brandon had his last few weeks to get to preach. And so it was one of those messages that I actually had a pretty good amount of time to think about and mess with. And so it kind of changed a lot, but yeah. So restored, bring things back to what they were meant to be.
And you use this illustration of not just any art, but what some people would call the greatest work of art ever. And you kind of mentioned that right up there with the movie Sharknado.
I threw that in first service.
That was funny.
And I got to laugh. And I'm like, oh, I'm using that both services.
Yep. That was a good joke. I like that joke.
Ninja Turtle one didn't get as much of a laugh.
Sharknado is a more ridiculous suggestion of a classic there. But
just for clarity, Sharknado is a movie about a horrible tornado that causes sharks to come up out of the water and fly through the sky.
Have you actually seen Sharknado?
No.
Okay.
I've seen enough of the previews to know that is brilliance right there.
There you go. It's just, genius.
Flying sharks.
So, but you didn't use just any work of art. You used the Sistine Chapel.
Which I've never been to, by the way.
You haven't? Okay.
Never been to Rome.
Okay. Well, I will tell you
on my bucket list
that as you go through the Vatican is breathtaking, all over the place. And you get to Sistine Chapel, and it's, for me and for some, I think they would say it's a little bit underwhelming.
I've heard that.
And so forth and so on. I remember when I went, I was in high school, and there was like scaffolding all around and stuff like that. They might have been they weren't in the restoration process. I was in the 80s. So, but it was, it was just, I don't know, it was a different vibe than I might have expected it to be. It was pretty crowded. You kind of just walk in and then you walk out as a little circle kind of deal. So
I do want to comment on something you just said, but it's theological. So I don't know if we should wait and come back to it or not.
Go ahead, say it.
Okay. So, I again, first of all, I'm not, if I gave the impression yesterday that Pete Goodman is like into art, no, not at all.
There you go.
But I studied a lot just because I was interested. I wanted, and the whole point of my message was that everything decays if you leave it alone.
Mm-hmm.
The way to keep things beautiful is to stay present with them.
Yeah.
So yes, there was a major art restoration that happened in the 80s, but now, so you go in there and there's scaffolding. Now they know that they can't wait 100 years to restore it.
Yeah.
There's a constant, I think every couple of years they do a process.
And they're doing more.
Right. So they now understand that to keep this painting looking beautiful for the next 5,000 years or whatever, they need to constantly stay on it. And that was my point, is God has
absolutely.
So they probably were doing some restoration when you were there in the 90s or 2000s.
They probably were.
Yeah.
So, and it's interesting because the rest of the Vatican, when you're walking through it, it's breathtaking because it's so clean, right? And it is bright, and there's like, you go up and there's even the doors are intricate, and well kept and everything. And so there's more to your point. But I want to kind of talk about the other side of restoration, because there's actually a whole group of people that would say the restoration of the Sistine Chapel is very controversial. There's a lot of people who were opposed to the idea of it being restored because they would say that it would actually take away from its originality, from what it was created to be. Some people would even say that the way that it's being restored is incorrect. And so I kind of want to talk through all those different angles because I know that somebody, and you shared this with me, somebody actually came up to you on Sunday and mentioned this to you and said that could almost be a whole nother
Yeah.
sermon, right?
I think that could be part 2.
that could be part 2 about how sometimes, even though we have restoration available for us, we don't actually want to go there because we've become comfortable with our degradation.
Yeah.
Our brokenness is predictable. Our brokenness is understandable. We don't really understand what it looks like to go through a restoration process. We don't really get what it even might look like if we were restored. And there's also some byproducts that might happen if we allow ourselves to go through this process of restoration, and some byproducts that might happen if we're restored in the middle of a whole lot of other people who maybe aren't,
Yeah.
right? And are still broken and things like that too. What does that do in that contrast, so forth and so on? And so when that was brought up to you, immediately when you were, I know the way your brain thinks, you probably started thinking through.
I wrote a message.
I was say, yeah. So that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
So what does that message look like?
I thought about it. I was like, man, should I do that next week?
Could.
No, we're moving.
Okay.
But there were like so many things that popped in my head. All of them were related to, so if you just like Google this, you go on Wikipedia, like it's very clear, like there were, and not just like random people, like art experts were like opposed to this.
Absolutely.
And there were a bunch of different reasons. It's too expensive. You're wasting money, right? This isn't worth it.
It was like $4 million.
Yeah.
Right.
That probably wasn't the most dominant from art experts, but other
Sure.
people were like, wait, what are you doing? Like, why are you spending all this money? It had been tried in the past and made it worse. So there were 3 or 4 attempts to restore it, like the 1600s, 1700s, even the early 1900s. And the people that were trying to do it were using products that were not, they didn't know at the time, were not product you should use on oil paintings, frescoes like that. So there was a sense of, oh, you're just going to make it bad again.
He just threw out the word fresca. Just want to let you guys know. He does care about art.
Okay. A fresco is a painting you do on a stone surface, like a wall or something, as opposed to like a canvas art. So there was that sense. There was also, this was interesting. There were art experts who were saying, like, this is the one that caught me the most after when I thought about it. They essentially, their argument was, you don't really know what it originally looked like, and none of you know that what you just did to it brought it back to its original.
Yes.
This might not be the original. You might just think it is, but you might have changed the colors yourself and not even known it. How do you know that that's actually what Leonardo painted?
And that's
Michelangelo painted.
That's one of the main arguments. I have an article open up from an art group and things like that too. And they actually talk about how Michelangelo probably used carbon black and a wash of glue to suggest shadows and add definition. And those were some of the things that people took away because most of the people that were restoring were adding brightness. And a lot of the people that were opponents of the restoration were saying, no. There was actually a lot of shadows and contrast that was meant to bring the richness out. And that's why it was originally designed.
Yeah.
And so kind of drawing this parallel a little bit more with humanity, how do we know what the original thing actually was supposed to look like? Where do we actually go?
And that's a big argument. It's funny because there's the argument like, don't do this at all. Like, don't touch it. Leave it alone. We're comfortable the way it is. You definitely hear that side of it. But then you also hear the side of like, well, no, I recognize that there's something wrong, but the way that you think to fix it, I disagree with. And really, that's where I think I've met people who are just like, no, leave me alone. I know I'm fine, whatever. But I've met a lot more people who are like, yeah, I recognize the world is broken. Like most people, and this is something I explored a lot, even in my writing and things, like most people recognize something's wrong.
Yes.
It's just like, it's not, I don't feel like the dominant argument among human beings is anything wrong or not? So the reason why we have so many religions and isms, philosophies, all isms in the world, whether it's Hinduism, Buddhism, whatever, all of them are focused on the same issue. All of them, even Marxism, socialism, all of these things are focused on the fact that something is wrong with the world. How do we fix it? And all of the isms are answers for how to make things better. Buddhism has an answer for evil, and Marxism does, and fascism does, right? All these are all different answers for how to fix the world, because all of those draw adherence and get people interested, because all human beings sense in their heart that the world is broken.
And
So
that
do
they
we
are.
need more government? Do we need less government? Do we need to escape pain and just, philosophize? Do we need to work harder? Do we need better teaching? All these different things are like
Or do we just need
attempts.
to accept it and find peace with it?
Yeah, right. Which or like, just drink up, have fun. So even in the ancient Greek world, you had those very
Yeah.
two different groups of people. You had Epicureans, who had a very like, look, you can't do anything about it, just enjoy your life. And then you had Stoics, like, no, you need to like be disciplined and make serious decisions in your life and push away vices and embrace virtue, and then you'll find goodness in the world around you. So, which obviously was much more something that aligned with Christianity, but every ism, like every religion in the world, is like an attempt to like deal with the fact that the painting feels faded. So what do we do about it? And then you even look at this story of, okay, we're gonna try to restore this building, and then you have all the voices saying, not that way, that's the wrong way, that's not bringing it back to original, which is that's just a microcosm of our world, of social media and the world today. It's like, no, that's not the way to do it. So if a Christian says, actually, I believe that the original design is best found in the pages of Scripture, therefore do this, and this in order to be restored.
Mm-hmm.
Someone else could say, your Bible's nonsense. I don't believe any of that stuff. I think it makes more sense to me that this would be the original. I think the original author used these blacks and shades and things, and the Bible isn't seeing that. So that's a constant tension.
So how do you even approach that? Like, when it comes to the controversy about restoring the Sistine Chapel, so much of the controversy is all about, well, what does the original really supposed to look like? What is it really supposed to look like?
Yeah.
Or what was Michelangelo's intent? What you call candle soot, maybe that was actually something that he did to create shadows and contrast, and now you're ruining it by taking that out of it and painting over it with some bright color to make it look, what your expression or interpretation of it should be. How do you even approach that with someone who maybe believes different, doesn't have a Christianity background, or even would be like antagonist against Christianity because of some of their experiences?
So that's a good question. We've moved into apologetics, which is the study of,
yes, a little bit.
And here's the deal. So let me sort of run these two parallel thoughts, but compare them together. So like the people talking about the Sistine Chapel, the people talking about faith. First, in both instances, if I'm talking to the person, if I'm an art restorationist, whatever, I would start with some form of like, let's talk about reasonable scientific ideas here. So, and you were throwing out examples, but good examples. Hold on. Let's actually examine the claim that Michelangelo might have used candle soot, and that this isn't from 500 years of candle burning. Is that actually rational? Like, let's talk about it. And the more that you talk about it, and if it was rational, if Michelangelo used it, how come when we go up here with a rag, it actually wipes off? Right? That seems irrational. Once I think about it,
there you go,
and apply reason to it, it doesn't seem to quite add up. So I think with any of the isms,
it's good.
There needs to be some rational, is this working?
Yeah.
Let's talk about this. And I'm not on this podcast to blast other people's belief systems, but like there are elements of other people's belief systems that to me just fall apart when you start pulling on threads. Like, I mean, some of them are maybe a little more logically coherent. I find Buddhism to be completely illogical, and Buddhists will often respond by saying, well, absurdity is embracing absurdity is part of finding peace with absurd world.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I can't. It's falling apart. It doesn't work for me.
It's not logical for you.
And so there are claims within Christianity, claims about the scriptures, claims about what we believe that I think you can actually look at and say, hold on, let's look at this rationally. I can't go back in time. I can't go back and talk to Michelangelo. None of us can. But there are things we can actually investigate and look at critically and rationally. And when we do, then you can say, okay, now what do I think of this?
Yeah.
which I think is an important part for me being a very logical thinker. I had to do that. I spent a lot of time doing that, and I still do. And I do my own podcast, doing that every time I get on a podcast. Like, let's look at these things logically and rationally, because I believe there is rationale behind it. So there's that side of it. The other side of it is this. And this is where it gets, there's the left brain and the right brain.
Yeah.
I forget which one is which, but we'll call that, is that left brain?
I think it's right brain.
Okay,
right?
that's right brain, whatever.
I don't know. I could be wrong.
The logical side. And then you can maybe move towards the emotional, the feeling side. Well, once we start doing this restoration process, what is the purpose of art? Well, the purpose of art is to enjoy beauty. As we're doing this process, is this building becoming more beautiful? If it is, what are you arguing with me about?
So here's where it gets even a little bit more philosophical. There's a lot of artists that would say that's not the purpose of art, is to enjoy beauty. Some would say it's to communicate culture. Some would say that it's to express the artist, right? Like there's a bunch of different purposes that could be interpreted as the purpose of art.
That's fair. That's fair. I think, though, I don't want to get philosophical about art itself, but it's a fair question. And I mean, we're drawing parallels.
We are.
What's the purpose of Christianity? There's a lot of people who would say, "Oh, the purpose of Christianity is to, like, create a system that gets you somewhere, and not to enjoy beauty."
Okay.
I disagree. I think the purpose of Christianity is to restore beauty, because God is an artist who painted beautiful things. I think, like, if somebody says the purpose of my art is to be political, I would say, well, then you're using art to be political. If the purpose of your art is to become famous, you're using art to become famous.
Oh, it's good. It's good
Right?
differentiation.
You're using this for an ulterior motive, which is okay. I was in music a lot when I was younger. I was in a band. You always wrestled with the tension when you interacted with other musicians, and even in your own heart. Am I doing this because I love music and I want to make music?
I want to make it.
Or do I want to get famous and rich and make girls want to talk to me? 9 out of 10 guys that learn guitar just want to get a date. 1 of the 10 loves art.
That's awesome.
For every glam rock band, there's like one, Simon and Garfunkel that are just poets with instruments. It doesn't mean that the glam rock guys weren't making some form of art. I just think their motives behind it were trying to get something that was really unhealthy. And I'm sure there's painters who really just wanted to be famous. At the end of the day, though, like, what if art isn't about expression and bringing beauty or thought to the world? Then I don't know. I think people who
I don't want to derail you. I just
it's interesting because it brings up the thing that I'm most interested in life, oftentimes, which is, what is Christianity about?
What's the why?
Of it? What's the why of it?
Yes.
Is there a motive behind it other than, is the motive to get people somewhere? I was thinking even this morning, this is like a huge tangent, but it's real. I was thinking about, as a person who works for a church, who I got up and preached on Easter Sunday, and the way in which the gospel, which comes from the word kerygma, which means to announce or proclaim something. The gospel is an announcement of something that has no return value for me. It's not a sales pitch, because a sales pitch is, I want to give you something that you'll then give me something back. Preaching the gospel, kerygma, doesn't offer a return. There's no sales pitch. It's just, here's truth, take it.
Yeah.
But pastoring a church is absolutely full of sales pitches, because I want you to attend my church. I want you to tithe at my church. I want my church to grow.
This is real.
So there's this tension. He's like, is the gospel a sales pitch? Well, inherently no, but you can take it and use it for something to get something out of it.
Wow.
The same is true with art, right? Is Christianity in general a sales pitch? Well, no, but can you take it and use it for your own motives and your own ends? Absolutely. We see that all the time. So I think art is similar. Art is the ability of a God-given human brain to create something interesting and new, and express the world in a different way. I just like, and whether it's through writing or painting or music or movies or whatever, like, art is, and I maybe sound a little bit pretentious, like I'm like this artsy guy. I am a very strong wing 4 on the Enneagram, which is artist. I love creativity. My favorite thing about getting to preach sometimes is finding ways to communicate
In
in
a creative,
interesting ways
yeah,
that are just because I enjoy the creative
whether it's a
side of it.
race car or
Yeah.
or something like that.
Like
Yeah.
just even just making those videos for I did yesterday, the opening video, just sitting and writing that script.
He wrote
and
that whole script for that video, which is
yeah,
cool.
and then you have another creative like Ben who takes all of the images and puts them together. And
Man, it was so good.
I enjoy because what happens with art is art touches on a side of your brain that my words can't, and it reaches into something in your feelings and your
Yes.
thoughts and emotions. And I think what's cool about Christianity is it cares about those things. It's not just intellectual. So bringing us back, like there is the intellectual side of it. I want to present a case for Christianity being true and rational and real. But then at the same time, I also want to be like, hey, I know we're going to argue about this, but look at the painting.
Yeah.
What do you think of it? Is it beautiful? If it's not, well then I've lost. If not, then why are we even arguing about this? If I'm not making the painting beautiful, like this is a waste of time.
Yep.
Like if it's becoming something that people gaze at and wonder and awe, like that's amazing, well then this process was worth doing. And so if Christianity is not beautiful, if it doesn't actually bring about goodness in our lives, then I don't think it's true. So where I ended yesterday, I did the whole like pretend I was painting the flower
Yep.
thing. And then I came back
Very
and
Bob Ross of you.
I thought about putting in the wig and I was like, too silly. Where I ended was like, listen, like I did a lot of like artsy, poetically kind of stuff this morning, but I need you to know, like, this has impacted my life. The painting called Pete Goodman is different because the artist got involved 25 years ago and that he's still involved. And just even this week there, I could tell you about things that he was just doing inside of me and wrestling and like constantly moving me away from faded, decayed brokenness towards something more like what he intended. So when I tell people about Jesus, when I engage in the argument, should you do it this way or that way? And I'm saying we should do it this way, called Christianity. I'm always ready to engage with them intellectually. Well, let's talk about this. Let's talk about the reasons and the logic behind it.
But it's also very
But I
personal.
also want to engage in the art side of it, the emotive side, the side that says, like, look, there's something I believe that Christianity works because I've seen it work.
Because it's transformed my life.
It's transformed my life. And then here's some other people. We play some testimony. And this, I love how John says in Revelation that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb
and the word of our testimony.
Yeah, the word of our testimony. Like
and not
if
loving
it's
our
true,
lives to death,
if it's true and it's brought beauty and goodness, it's worth sharing and it's worth inviting people into. So that's I don't know. That's why I enjoy preaching. I think it touches on both sides of my brain.
So I think you're following the track of where I wanted even to take us on this podcast was if we can prove that the restoration is what's best for the painting, that restoration is what's best for the human, then what is the reasons why we would actually create barriers and controversies about actually submitting our lives to restoration? Submitting the Sistine Chapel to being restored by experts. Why do you think people will sometimes, and I'm not just talking about people in general, I'm talking about Christians, will even sometimes say, no, there's areas that I don't want to go through a restoration. In fact, actually, I will resist it even intellectually. I'll resist it emotionally. Why do you think those resistances happen? If we all agree and we can see the painting and say it's beautiful, it's what's best, the restoration is what's bringing about the most life and it's life more abundant that Jesus talks about.
Yeah.
Why do you think that there is still something inside of us that gives us a proclivity to want to avoid actually going through restoration and being restored?
I like the word proclivity.
Okay.
You've now touched on probably the second major passion of my Christian life. I think the answer boils down to one essential basic thing that is all over the pages of Scripture. And you can translate it differently, but it's the same word, trust or faith, it's the same word. We don't trust. I don't trust you to fix this painting. I don't trust you that what you're saying is fully accurate. I think you have an agenda. I don't trust that God is actually going to do this. I don't trust that God actually wants to do this. I don't trust that God is actually there. Um, I can't trust that that will be better. I can't trust that the pain that I might go through in order to be healed is even worth getting there. Trust is everything. Trust is the foundation of all relationships. It's at the center of everything. So if what we're talking about is ultimate relationship with God, then at the core of it is trust. Do I trust God? Trust was at the initial fall of humanity,
Yes.
and trust is in the middle of the restoration of humanity. We're saved by grace through faith, which is trust, the same word. Do I trust God? And so where I wanted to end, and I tried to, I didn't get super deep, but I tried to get into it. Like all the voices, when I was doing the restoring the painting scene at the end, all of the voices were saying, I have this problem in my life. And I
Yeah.
tried to have the quote unquote voice of God. Thanks, Terrence.
Yep.
Reiterate this idea of trust me, come follow me. I got this. If you just trust me enough to follow me. Now, that creates many levels of problems, because for some people, the problem is that they don't trust God. You even heard 2 of the testimonies in the video yesterday weren't an issue of trusting God originally. It was, I don't trust people. Like the church hurt me. Like these stupid Christians trying to steal my money hurt me, whatever. Some people, it's like, I don't trust myself and my own ability to even, it's like, what is that? Like all these kind of things. Like, so the central call right in the middle of the entire thing called Christianity is the word trust. You hear it more as faith. We literally call it the faith, right? The faith.
Yeah.
It is a trust. It is I am putting my life in God's hands, trusting that what he said is true and he'll do what he said he was going to do. And that all these people around me who call themselves followers of Jesus, I can also somehow kind of trust and join in. And these people that are standing on a stage with a microphone and a big flashy LED wall behind them are saying something that is true and believable and worthy of trust. Man, there's so many problems with that. There's so many reasons not to trust. I've got a bucket full of them in my own heart. I know you do as well.
That's real. Yeah.
So I understand when people say they don't trust. I'm not like, what? I'm like, yeah, I get it.
I get it. Yeah.
I will say though, I don't know what it is. Maybe you could speak into this. It doesn't, speaking of me personally, Pete Goodman, being in a position where I am leading and I put myself on that stage, it doesn't daunt me or scare me. Sometimes it kind of excites me. I don't worry or lose sleep or have anxiety about the fact that other people don't trust Christians. I acknowledge it. And then I think there's a way in which it actually helps me to constantly reorient my thinking and my communication, and to be like, hey, like people don't naturally trust me. They don't trust what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yesterday at Easter service, I'm sort of, depending on who I think I'm preaching to, even when I say the Bible says so, like I actually was very cautious in how I worded that yesterday. It was like, hey, there was this guy named Paul who wrote to a church in Rome. I didn't say Romans chapter 3, and like in the opening, I said, that's actually the entire story of the Bible. Like when I started off by saying is the pain, and that was my way of saying, hey, a lot of you probably don't even trust the Bible or know what it's about. Let me just give you this, like, this is what it's about.
Yeah.
And then there's this first chapter, and I kind of threw in a little bit, is it literal? Is it metaphorical? That statement wasn't for the believer in the room. That statement was like, well, hold on. It's like what? God had legs and was walking. Is that like, what is happening? Like, hey, let me get you past that point and get to the heart of what's being said here. How can I communicate in a way that people begin to actually give some credence to the scriptures and be open to believing it? How can I talk in a way from the stage that helps people feel like this guy is somebody that maybe we can believe and trust? And I think that's something that Rise City has always cared about and done a good job at, of trying to like be authentic and transparent.
And I think also not speak from a place of being like above anyone else. We're trying our best, and I think you do this very well. We try our best to point people to Jesus,
Yeah.
because relatively, I think we're pretty trustworthy people, but ultimately we are not. Each of
Oh,
us will
right.
fail
Well,
people. We will
yeah.
fail everyone if you give us enough time, right?
Absolutely.
The only one who will not is Jesus Christ. And so if we can point people to Jesus, and we can leverage our own lives and our own brokenness to get people there, to show them, look, I've been broken and I have failed and I have experienced failure, both failure done to me and failure that I've done. And I've seen Jesus's faithfulness show up to the point where he is trustworthy over and over and over again. And he's stood the test of time. And so therefore you can trust in him. What battles that for me, and I think for almost every single person, including the very first story in the fall and in Genesis, is this idea of I know better, right? It's even what trying to keep a lot of people from submitting the Sistine Chapel to restoration, right? Like, no, this is how it should be done. We shouldn't actually do it at all because I know better, right? There's always this idea of I know, so I'm not going to surrender to what you say.
Sure.
Right. And so I think that is a battle that's within each and every one of us when it comes to our ability to submit and surrender to God's restoration as well. And so
Yeah,
to
it's
communicate
hard.
that's a hard thing.
I think the challenge is intermediaries. So when I was doing when I was writing my doctoral work, I spent a whole section talking about how in the ancient world there was a very common role a person played, and it lots of different words could describe it. Um, Envoy, steward, ambassador.
Mm-hmm.
It was very common
Messenger kind
because
of, yeah.
so think about this. Like if I want to talk to somebody and communicate, I pick up my phone and like, hey, this is what I want. Well, imagine 2,000 or 3,000 years ago when you needed to communicate someone to someone. Well, what did you do? You would say, hey, you go and tell this person what I want. Intermediaries or envoys, or like somebody to take care of your property when you weren't there. That word manager or steward is all over the Bible.
Yeah.
Because it was very common. Like I'm gone. Today we have all these systems in place. We have courtrooms and all this kind of stuff. Digital technology and media that lets me constantly, but back then, all of that only worked with one basic thing. It worked with faith, trust. If I don't trust you, this doesn't work. Because you could go to that other person, that other nation, whatever, and be like, this is actually what the king said. And just like completely, like if there's not trust between us that you're actually going and communicating what I really said, this whole thing falls apart. If I can't trust that you're going to manage my property the way that I want you to, this is all going to fall apart.
Yeah.
So it's very common in the ancient world for people to say that faith or trust was the linchpin of human civilization. Like if we can't trust each other, this falls apart. Much of our modern world has gotten around the problem of trust with technology in ways to keep an eye on each other and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. Courtrooms to sue each
Mechanisms
other.
to fact check.
Right. But that didn't exist in the ancient world. Trust was everything. So honor, it was an honor shame culture. Like keeping your word and being true to what you said was the greatest virtue of all. Mm-hmm. A person who wasn't faithful was wicked and terrible and horrible. Yeah. To be loyal and faithful and true was like the greatest thing you could be, especially even in the Middle Ages. That's everywhere, right? An honest and a person of faithfulness, faith was like the greatest thing, because without that, society falls apart. So in this case, I think what matters, and we have to recognize it, is I would say, I'm going to throw this out there. Okay. There's 8 billion people on the planet. I think 7,999 some million of them, if God showed up in their room and said, I want you to do this, they'd be like, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if the biggest problem is that people don't trust God. I think the biggest problem is, for the most part, God communicates through intermediaries, through pages of scripture and pastors who tend to wear really nice shoes. And you're like, where'd you get those shoes, buddy? And like people
shoes.
Well, I'm just saying, like the intermediaries who are representing quote unquote God are oftentimes the things that we don't trust. most of us feel, I think the basic problem is we don't have direct access to God, which personally I actually believe that we do, but that's a separate case. Like even getting to that point though of having access to God required me to trust somebody else that told me the process and what it looked like.
Yeah.
So if I didn't trust that person that told me that, I never would have taken the step. So I think at its root, like
It's
the
good, yeah.
trustworthiness of the Bible and the trustworthiness of the heralds of the Bible, Christians, and especially people who do it for a living, like pastors. If we're not trustworthy, then people aren't going to pay attention to it. So it's no surprise to me that if I were opposed to all of this, let's say I were some kind of spiritual entity that hated all of this stuff and wanted to ruin it. Well, what I would do is I would go out and I would find all the people who are on stages telling me to believe it, and I would make them unbelievable people. I would lead them into horrible sins that were public. I would get them to be totally focused on money and themselves and make them look like unbelievable people. And then everyone else would be like, oh, that's all nonsense. Look at the intermediaries are all fake.
Wow.
Which is pretty much what's happened, right? So for us to be in this position and say, okay, we are going to stand on stages and speak for God. Jesus said, like, think about what Jesus said. Like, he's like, hey, not like if you want to do this, it's cool. But if you're going to lead people astray, I would rather you tied a rock around your head and drowned yourself. Like that's like not like everyone's like, I want to be a leader, I want to be in charge, I want to preach. Like, okay, well,
Cool.
just to be clear, like Jesus said, he thinks suicide is better for you than you leading people astray and being untrustworthy. Like, but think about how important it is, because if people can't trust that this form of restoration is the best, then they're never going to follow through it. And if they think that you're pushing something that isn't believable and trustworthy because you're not trustworthy, you've undermined the whole thing. And that's a shame. And so for me, that's such an important part of my psyche, the way I think, the way I process. Like, what does it look like to not only present myself as trustworthy, but actually be trustworthy?
Actually legitimately live that way.
Yeah. Not to just
Best you can.
So how do I communicate in a way that builds trust, but how do I live in a way that builds trust? All those kinds of things are, man, this took a weird turn, didn't it? Where are we?
It took a really good turn. I think it took and I think it's meaningful. I think that if you're listening, we do need to wrap this up, but I think that if you have come to the point where you do believe that the restoration is what's best, if you look at it and you've come to the conclusion, and where we really wanted to go today was, let's prove that it is the best, as best we can, within, 30, 40 minutes or so. And then if it is, then let's talk about the barriers that keep you there, that keep you from being restored, including what you just mentioned, what the enemy is doing with leaders and with pastors all over the world. And I would say even throughout history, like the interpretation of this book, the Bible, has become a big stumbling block for a lot of people in a lot of different circumstances.
And the historicity of it, is it even reliable? Yeah.
All that kind of stuff has become a thing. The enemy has attacked all those different places. And so there's that at work, and I believe that. But there's also some fleshly things inside of us. We've grown, sometimes I'll prefer comfort over even what's best. And what's comfortable is what I already know more than what is the best that could be, right? Yeah. And so sometimes I'll stay where I'm at, even if it means forfeiting the great place that I could be at, right? And what God calls me to. I'll stay where I'm at because it's more predictable. I understand it. I know it better, and so I can live with it.
So something I cut out of my message, I came back a couple times and kept paring it down to get it short enough for Easter Sunday. I had a whole paragraph. So when I started my message, I talk about Michelangelo painting it, and I say, 10,000 square feet, and then how they come back and restore it. And I was very clear in my language. I was like, it was a painstakingly slow and extremely expensive process.
Yes.
I did that actually because at the end of my message, I come back and say, oftentimes restoration is painstakingly slow and extremely expensive.
It costs you.
It's not easy, but you got to trust that it's worth it.
Yeah.
I actually ended up cutting that whole paragraph because I knew I was just out of time. But I got to say it here. Like that idea though of like this took a long time. Like we have a value here at Rise City, incremental over instant. And we believe that stuff doesn't happen overnight. It's slow, and that it takes some work. It takes some effort. And that's another thing that I've always been passionate about, which is moving us away from this thought about Christianity where everything is just free and handed to you, and what I said yesterday was the ability to bring the artist back in your life was free. It's paid for. It's done.
Yeah.
But once the artist is back in your life, now it's like the scriptures are clear. Let's get to work.
And you said it takes some involvement on your part.
And so to see the painting restored means I'm going to have to go through some painful things. I'm going to have to say yes and no to things that I might not want to, trusting that he's bringing something beautiful. And if I don't, it'll never happen. So, and again, but even in that is trust.
To say, I'm going to surrender what I know is comfortable.
Yeah.
For what
it's
you
worth
say
the
is
pain.
best.
It's worth the slow process. It's going somewhere. I don't see it working. Just wait, trust it. Well, all of that is trust. And so living by faith is to say, I trust that what God is saying is right, even if I'm not seeing it right now.
Yeah. And so, I mean, if you're at that place where you're like, okay, I need to trust, then I want to encourage you to actually take a step towards that. Absolutely. And so if that means leveraging the comment section on whatever device or platform you're listening to this or watching this on, say something, or sending us a message, or emailing one of us. You know, you can email Pete at RiceCityChurch.com or Robert at RiceCityChurch.com. We're just guys that have learned that the painter really wants us to be restored, and we've experienced glimpses of what that looks like. And it really lines up with what Jesus calls a life more abundant, that I believe everyone is created for. And so if you've listened to this, if you listened on Easter and you want to make a response right now and actually start to say, I'm going to trust, like Pete was saying, I think that this is your moment. This is your time. Like right now, whatever you're doing, if you're in the car, pull over, whatever you're doing, this is your time when you could actually make that response and send one of us an email, you know, write a comment, whatever it is that you do, just do something to start moving towards God's restoration and God's best in your life.
Absolutely. It's good. Yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
But thank you, Pete, for an awesome Easter and your work and your investment for that Easter. It was a blessing to me and my family, and I'm sure it was to you and yours as well.
The whole team.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was fun.
Yes.
I'll end with this. One thing that was fun about it is I've been on the other side for a decade. You know, Easter's always an opportunity where we're all busy because we have an idea, or Christmas as well. And you put all this work into you're building videos. This was the first time since I've been at Rise that I've actually been able to be the one sort of doing it. It was fun. But I know because of the last decade that every Easter Sunday is this team of people.
Absolutely.
And even just, I would even say man, Good Friday was an amazing service. And I had nothing to do with it, and that was glorious, and you and Ben and Dawson and man, just did such a great job. So everything we do is a group of people working together, and it's cool. Not just the person standing on the stage is one of many that's just helping.
For goodness sake, Anthony and Dawson was in a bunny outfit. You were in a bunny outfit.
Was it a bunny outfit or was it a pig?
People said it was an Easter pig. It's actually the bunny outfit from A Christmas Story. If you looked at it, it says A Christmas Story on it for Easter. But they were in there,
Looked like a pig to me.
It kind of looked like a little bit of a pig because it's pink. But either way, there was people that were investing and leveraging all over the place.
Absolutely.
So thank you. If you greeted yesterday, if you hung out with some kids in the kids ministry and taught them about Jesus, thank you for your investment. It makes a big difference in all these different ways. So
absolutely.
All right. Well, we'll see you next time on Digging Deeper. Can't wait. We're starting a new series called...
it's called Calibrate.
There it is. You almost lost it.
I almost said we debated whether to put the RE. Was it recalibrate?
No, it's calibrate.
We're going to look at some of the letters that went to the early churches in the first few chapters of Revelation. Yep. We're not looking at Revelation the entire book, just for clarity, because I've gotten that question. But the book opens by Jesus giving statements to 7 churches and dealing with how to stay on track and stay healthy.
That'll be good.
So
looking forward to that. So join us this Sunday, and then we'll see you next time on Digging Deeper as well.
Thanks, guys.